How are you?
Good. Yes, I love the ending to your video.
Oh, thank you.
And then it just turned. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of bittersweet to have to do that, and I thought I may as well film it if I had to do it.
Well,
so I'm glad I did.
Yeah, it's an important part to it.
Yeah, it's a. Yeah, I wasn't that happy when I had to do it, but then I thought I'd make the most of it. And
do you want to just tell people what happened at the end?
Yeah, sure. So there was after the project was well, actually before I even started, Parks came to me and said, what's up with this line? And because we kind of had cleared it with Parks, and management didn't get the note, sort of thing. So they let the theater company know that I had to have it removed. So they came and talked to me. They're real nice and everything, and I told them I'd do my best. And so yeah, they came to me at the end of the day and they're like, when are you going to do it? And I was like, I'll be here first thing tomorrow morning. So we'd wrapped up at like 5 or 6. And so I just went back the next day with some pails and shovels and cloths to wipe down the plants and things like that. So I spent the better part of the morning doing that. I think the time lapse took me about an hour in total to do that digging. So I just did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but apparently the line is still sort of there. You can't see it in the pond as much, but you can see it as a bit of a halo in the grass. So it's kind of interesting how it's holding on, and it's iron, so it's not hurting it.
Right.
Yeah.
Hello. Well, thanks very much for taking on the conversation. I think it was on Johannes's side. I think there was the delay was going through there, Johannes. So I couldn't find the link there. But welcome all. I'm going to forego the introductions, and I hope that you could have already introduced yourselves. But now I'm going to let Johannes take on the discussion.
Sorry for the troubles, everyone, and I'll just just mention that all of the performances that we're presenting tonight are shot for the video. That the video camera is a very important part of the pieces and the way it was recorded. They're also performances that have a very special relationship with the land. People have made very different connections, relationships, and different approaches and different intents of how they have worked with the land. And it's working with the land. It's not just being on top of it. It's being very present and being very aware of the environment that they're in. Jay, Linda, do you have any other things you might want to say about the overall introduction?
Well, there's one interesting thing I noticed, and it had to do with the kind of land, because often land is, is the pastoral, and so we've got like land that's not traditionally valued in the same way. And I thought that was really interesting. So we have the gravel pit, a lot of rocks, a lot of land that isn't usually videoed.
Yeah. Linda, where was if we could start with the first slide, Thomas. So the first piece we're going to talk about is Linda's video, which is called Walking with Trees, and it's shot on her where she lives, and it's about I think a personal piece. Linda, do you want to go further into this?
Sure. So it was shot on Treaty 6 territory, south of Saskatoon. And often I start with an idea. This had no idea. I was totally responding to the land. And it started with the trees, and it's on the top of a very windy hill. So we started planting trees, and the person I was planting them with died after the first set of trees were planted. And so every time I'd see the trees, it was like a marker of time. And you think trees grow really slowly, but in fact, they kept growing. And it was like a marker of how many years. And I just started I've always walked around. So I would walk. I started videoing myself walking among the trees. And then just doing things that felt right in terms of maybe the care of the land, just laying on the land. Some of it was like, birthday candles, like sort of that being aware of the land as something that mattered to me a lot.
Is this first image that we see, is that sort of the first time, the first part of that work?
That was the starting point, actually, because it was, well, there is an interesting thing about trees is that they hold the snow, just from an environmental perspective. So this snow is really deep. And I start out and, the section that Johannes has captured is me falling in the snow because it was like, maybe 5 feet deep and there'd be a crust. And then as soon as I landed, stepped on it, I'd go in. So there was a struggle about getting through the land. And I think that's part of it. It's something about working your way through it. And
that's why I chose that image, actually, was because of the struggle and that it wasn't easy. And that's also reflected in some of the other images. What you went through is obvious in the video.
Right, yeah. And I did all my own videoing, I should say. I sort of forgot about the performance part of it because it was just setting the camera up and doing, whatever felt right at that time.
Next image. It's also interesting how you framed the video and the different shots, one leading to the next. The one image on my left was first. It was the first image that comes up, and then the second one on the right. You introduce these different images and then pair them up in very interesting ways.
Well, they're the same land, and so that's actually sage. And so I was lying with the sage, and even in the winter, there's this aroma. And then it was just like what I did is just stroked each sage plant that was in the field. And it was just, it was one of those things that it seemed like it was like about care.
And the act of laying down in it?
It's how can you get close to the land? It's just like, that's what I said. It was very irrational, but it was like, that's what I needed to do. But I did bring my pillow with me. Which is maybe.
And you also had to break the snow to lay down on it.
Yes, like it was a rough winter. So, but then it was that thing of being just there and listening. And in fact, there's audio going with it in all of this. And there were coyotes just over the fence. And so what I did, I have human and non-human sounds combined. And I actually hired someone named Leah Pa who can make wind sounds that sound almost human. And it was sort of that, again, that where am I in relationship to the land? And where's the land relative to me? So it was that blurring and just listening a lot.
That wind sound is also quite haunting in some ways.
Yeah, well, because I think sometimes it felt human and subhuman, or I don't know what the word would be, like not human, but not natural. And I guess I was interested in, where's the space between us and the land?
Next image. This is the candles. Is the number of candles significant at all?
No, it was the ones I could get to stand up because it was, again, this ice. But it was, so you do these things and then nature takes over. And I just got them all lit and they were coming down and then the wind came up. And so it was like the wind saying, okay, we are blowing out your candles now.
But it didn't blow them all out because there's a time lapse thing. I mean, did you light them all again? Because
no, some actually stayed. Some went down into the ice and then kept burning.
Yeah.
And so it's this like sort of magical thing of some candles that sort of won out with the wind.
We're also very conscious of time. The time that time has lapsed. Having those candles, that you were there with those candles as they were burning, you were watching them, videotaping that there's a presence there, just like I feel your presence with when you're laying down.
Yeah, it was also freezing cold that day, so I was really extra aware of the time.
Yeah,
and seeing what's going to happen, because part of this was just being present with the land, and you know, a feeling that they needed.
Yeah.
The land needed an acknowledgement. And how do you not acknowledge land? The same way you do everything else.
Next image. And here you're doing two things. You're crawling across the landscape and you're stroking a tree that is on your on the land. Correct? Yeah.
And again, that tree is like I'm not sure what kind, but it started as a stick and it's still a pretty fragile specimen. But so it was that thing of caring for it. And again, irrational, but it seemed like that I was doing it for it.
Yeah. So
when you think about the performance was fairly intuitive. And this is back to getting on the land. So the top two are, and there's a third one, is crawling across the land. And it was like just being with it. In a way.
It also reminded me of one of those religious crawling across the landscape, like crawling to upstairs to some church kind of thing.
I felt a bit like that too. That one wasn't like, it was odd, but it seemed was what I needed to do. But it was of all the things, that was an ordeal. And it was hard to get through. And it seemed like that was part of it.
Yes. Yeah. Next slide.
So this exactly like we've gone from winter to summer, to spring and then summer. The one on the left is where the leaves are just coming out. But then how the space has changed. So these are the same trees, but they feel like they've grown a lot. And it's because of, all the leaves have come out. But it's, so it was about that sort of different kinds of markers of time.
Yes.
And sort of what, because I'm really aware of that history of when they started. Yeah. It was something, anyway, that's what it was.
Yeah, the dog that you're with is also a very interesting presence because he's so lively and bouncy and just willing to be there, whereas you're very focused in your action.
So somebody told me that nobody would take this seriously because the dog was there. Which is an interesting thing because that was the only person with me on the land, and he was present all the time. And sometimes I try to have him shift off and he wouldn't.
Yeah. Next slide. Next.
Okay.
Really getting into the trees with this background. Next slide. Yeah, you're actually climbing into the trees.
Yeah. So that was the one on the left was Caragan, and it was the fact that I could literally disappear into it. Yeah. And that was just like an incredibly moving thing. And climbing, like it was just that relationship to the various elements, and they're all elements that we had shaped together, that we had planted, we had watered, all that. And so at this point, it was my time to spend time with these elements.
Yeah.
And do you want me to tell you about the storm?
Yes.
Okay.
Next slide as well, because it's this there as well. Yeah.
So I'm living out there, and it's on the top of a hill, and partly what the trees were because it was so windy, but this is a prairie thing. I'm sure, Jay, you know about this. You can see a storm coming. And I'd always wanted to just be there at the right time with my camera to see this storm literally come through. And it did. So I videoed it all the way through until it came, like basically came over the house, and I was soaked. And my camera was too. And it was that relationship of the sky to me and the land and I. Yeah.
And the bird?
It was amazing because I had nothing to do with that. But as I'm, looking at it, I realized that bird is responding to the sky too. And because I've been there longer, I see there's a tension. I think it's like electricity, but the birds swoop like that when there's a storm. Yeah, but it just happened to be right there. Yeah.
Thank you, Linda. And I now would like to move to Jay's piece.
Could I just say a couple things?
Sorry, Jay.
Is this a good time for that, or we
yes,
can
please,
circle back?
Please. Yeah.
Yeah. I just thought this piece was really interesting. It was very prairie. I really liked it. I really felt like it was a good representation of this place. And yeah, because time does move so interesting. Sometimes it's, especially in the rural, like you can see things building and growing, your trees growing very slowly. And so it can be a real mark time. And then, yeah, something like a fire, like your candles, different symbolism, but it can happen really quickly. So I really liked sort of those tensions that you were playing with. I think that the plant that you weren't sure of that was red, I think it was red willow. And I thought it was really interesting that you were showing like gestures of care towards the plants that are from here, the sage and the willow, and that you were the colonizer plant, the invasive species of Carigana. It's a great thing, but it's not from here. And you're kind of just like getting in it, and it was just like a really different gesture. I thought that was pretty interesting. And that swallow here in this frame is so beautiful. It's, for me, it triggers memories of watching them before a big storm would come because they eat all the mosquitoes. And so they zip around acting all erratic right before a storm, having a feed of bugs because they're all trying to get cover. And so, again, it's just these sort of these memories get kind of connected. And yeah, I thought it was a really beautiful piece. I like the struggle.
And I think that's embedded in the land. I think there's a history of struggle and all of that. And thank you, Jay. The other thing I didn't mention is that this is actually native prairie grassland, except for we planted trees because we tried to put one apple tree in and it just got blown away. So we had to put in enough trees to have a little bit of shelter, but what's growing all around is native grassland, except for the Carigana, which is, if you drive around, that's a sign of settler intrusion. And I guess I've been really aware of those tensions too. And they continue. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Are we okay? Yes. To go to Jay's now? Yes.
Sure.
Yes. There we are. Nope. Too fast. Back up. Nope. Anyway, the Jay's piece is Landline, Landmine, and it was made. The video was made this year, but it was performed last year at an event called Trespassers Waltz, organized by Curtain Raisers. Curtain Raisers, is that right? Yeah. And Jay's piece was one of many of a number of pieces that happened on the land at the same time. Jay, your piece was durational, is that right?
It was, yeah. I installed it in the morning, the physical line. Well, no, actually, I installed it the day before the event, and then returned to it in the morning and sort of did some touch-ups, and then did a performance throughout the day.
Next slide.
4 hours.
Yeah. I just wanted that image of you on the red line, and it's such a strong marker in the landscape, even with the drone shots that are part of the video. Can you tell me more about the line itself?
Yeah, of course. It's some characteristics of it. It's made from iron oxide, and so that's the Earth's most common material. So I didn't feel so bad about using it as graffiti, being kind of a bit of an environmentalist myself. I knew it would go back, so that was really important for me to make that choice. It's also a ceramic material that I use all the time in my art practice, so I'm really familiar with its attributes and how it would have performed on the land. So there was no testing. I just went and did it, and I used a backpack sprayer, and I sort of surveyed out a long string across the landscape and pegged it down in several places, and then kind of started drawing a line, and then just kept going back and forth, making it kind of denser and thicker until I was happy with the aesthetic of it. And it kind of transits almost a kilometer, kind of over a hill, through grass, through a pond, and then back up over another hill. And the line
was that long.
Yeah, it's a really large landscape. Yeah, and so I just walked it back and forth throughout the day. And we can talk about my performance in a little bit, but
yeah,
and the line itself was pointed at Polaris, like I mentioned in the video. So I kind of pulled out my phone and my star map, and I figured out where it was, and that's how we kind of pointed the line. So it was pretty exact, and it was nice because it actually led me up towards another performer who was playing the violin all afternoon. So she was just in this beautiful grove playing some original compositions. And so I got to walk up to this violin music that was happening and then walk away from it. So it was really emotional for me. Sometimes I was barely able to contain myself as I walked back and forth.
Yeah. Can you tell me a bit more about the performance part of it?
Yeah, the performance was pretty ad hoc. I'd have to say I kind of daydreamed about maybe performing something, but I was really just showing up that day to watch other people look at my line, and then because I had pre-installed and I was one of the only people who did a land-based performance. Most other were theater and music. And so because of that, I walked around and got to see everybody's performances. Nobody really got to do that during the day. So I did the very first tour of the day, and I was just so jaw-dropped by what everybody was doing. And so I walked by Barbara Manili, and I just said to her, I'm thinking about doing a performance on the line. And I kind of told her why I might not do it. And she's like, could you live with yourself if you didn't do it? Sort of kind of thing. And so I just went and did it. She's like, why wouldn't you? And so I just kind of turned around and went back and started this performance where I had my leftover iron at the one end of the line. So I would start my walk by drenching my forearms in the iron. And then as I walked across the line, it was kind of dripping. And then when I got to the very center of the line, the bottom of the pond, I would face the audience. There was sometimes 100 people, sometimes 2. And I would give them a real stare down. You'll see a photo of it, but a real eye contact with everybody. No one was getting off the hook without acknowledging me there. And it was it was hard. Like you'll see in the one shot, I'm kind of smiling a little bit, and it's because I'd seen a friend I hadn't seen for years, and so I was just like, and then I was like, oh, get back into character, you know, because I'm doing this thing. But so I had this moment with the audience, and then I sort of ignored them, and I looked up to Polaris. So that's what's happening in this image. Is I'm looking up at the North Star, and just taking a moment to acknowledge it. And then I started walking towards it and walking towards the violin music. So that was the performance, and I just repeated that over and over.
When you started the performance, did you have the intention that you speak of in the voiceover narrative?
Yeah. I did, for sure. Yeah, that was what the whole piece was about, and I think I'm insecure as an artist in some ways about, especially with new work, like land-based work, some kind of new venture for me. And so I wasn't sure if like my concepts would get across, if it would translate without me getting in there and performing as well. So putting myself in that position, putting myself into a hyper aggressive place where I was staring down the audience, intimidating them, making them feel really uncomfortable. I wanted them to feel that, because you know, anybody who's trespassing in Saskatchewan right now is going to feel that. They're going to get it from the landowners or the police or whoever. It's going to happen. And so I wanted them to feel that tension, but then I just ignored them after I was staring them down, and then I just looked up to Polaris with hope, you know, just with nothing else than just pure hope. And so that's what kind of this look is about. Mm-hmm. It's just that there's more than just this bullshit that we kind of deal with right now that's culturally happening.
Mm-hmm. Next slide. Next slide. There's it. I also wanted to show this slide because this is where you're walking into the pond area, correct? But yeah. I found it interesting in relationship to what Linda was saying about the trees. And look how many trees there are in this landscape. Is it that different? Is it not grassland? Are those trees planted? Do you know, Linda?
They look pretty familiar to me. And I think it's just that they don't grow that big. For me, this looks like a fairly typical prairie grassland. And the aspen bushes are a crucial part of it. And they're environmentally critical. They actually prevent or block forest fires because they come into that and they also grow back. So this looks like a standard grassland. Grassland isn't necessarily grass. Like it's certain trees that come in it.
Yep.
Yeah, anywhere there's a dip.
Yeah.
A tree will try and grow in it, or a bush will try and grow in it.
So you can always tell, you know, the dips because it's the water table has changed.
Well, I was wondering if this was a natural dip because it looks, from this angle anyway, it looks man-made.
Like the berm around the pond?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, White Butte is a really complicated place. You know, it's a really sacred indigenous place that's now a protected park where people go cross-country skiing and hiking and walking their dogs, you know, and it's a really complicated spot because they protected this little tiny area, but it has so much environmental disturbance to it. So yeah, what you're seeing are like some natural paths, some constructed paths. It's hard to tell. There's roads all through there. I don't really know what's gone on for the last 100 years on that site per se. It hasn't always, I don't think it's always been like fully protected as it is now. But all the perimeter of the land, all around it in every direction, is like so not protected. You know, it's very like the opposite of protected in some ways. Yeah.
Next slide. I love the image and seeing you change the land and the text that you've put with it is so moving that I was so happy to see this with the work. and yeah.
Yeah, I try to write when I make things, and I'm not like I have like a pretty rural education in Saskatchewan, and so I think my English teacher was like a gym major, or like nobody was teaching what they were supposed to be teaching, and so there was some limitations there, and I can get ideas down really rapidly, and then I rely on my partner Terry to help me distill my ideas and edit them into like she's able to kind of highlight the poetry of the words of what I've been working with. So yeah, a lot of credit to her in capturing that. And in this image I captured myself, but the other images were captured by Munns Media. They were hired for the day to create the drone footage, and Chris Graham also did some photos, and then Eric Hill did my editing for me. So it's definitely a bit of a teamwork. But I wanted to, with the writing of this, I just really needed to share my experience, because covering up that line was a bittersweet moment for me, and I felt really, triggered, for a lack of better words. I use the word in the writing, but I'm hearing guns and diggers and highway and all these things around me, and this is their concern. This is where I'm spending my day.
Yeah. Linda, you also write a lot, and there wasn't as much. You just did an intro to this piece, correct?
Yeah. I just titled it, and that's an ongoing issue for me. Like, I struggle with how much do you just leave it, and in this case, I also didn't write ahead of time. It's probably one of the most intuitive, or let's say it was the start of intuitive work. Since then, I've done things that also don't make sense, like the sitting in the hole, which you were part of, was just it mattered to me to do that, and then eventually I invited other people to come. But I think that video was probably the first step in saying I don't have to understand it yet, and some of the writing for me is about trying to understand it later. The other thing I'll say is about the words about the train, because that's the other theme that's running through, and another gravel pit, the automatic guns, that you've got this land, but like a lot of people have used sound to put these other elements in, like to say they're, it's not as intact.
It's also interesting the way the other elements that are the links, like you laying in the land, and Lakalu laying on the muskox fur in the landscape, and again the bird flying through it. And the way Yves Tanguy is working in that landscape, that very minimalist landscape, just the way, Jay, you're working in a very minimalist landscape. In some senses, it's a very minimal object, that line, but it's the complexities that come up while you're doing it, and the unknown relationship with you and the land, and Eve and the other people that she's working with.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really interesting parallels through this entire series. Like, I implore everybody to go watch them all. They're really fascinating, and I think you'll see a lot of connections of just how people are trying to express what's going on in their lives right now. Is a lot of what I saw too.
Yeah. And it's also interesting. S.P.A.N.E mentioned that in his video, his piece was also very intuitive and very being in the moment and just reacting to what he saw, and having that sound of the singing sand come through. It was also, like just being there and taking it in, and the same that Yves Tanguy does in the gravel pit, letting a rock roll and responding to the way one rock moves around other rocks. It is really being there in the moment, just like Linda with the sedge, the way you're touching that.
I think there's also like what's invisible. So sometimes the sound is invisible, like in Ed's piece, that there are the waves that I'd hear, and so then you realize that there's another context for it, and quite a few of them are sound pieces as well as visual.
Yeah. Like Lucalou's as well, the sound that she's added to her piece.
Yeah, it's central to it, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I see that there's a question.
Shall I read it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hello, Linda. When you made this work, did you already plan to shoot through the different seasons? I really like how time unfolds. The introduction of the different screens accentuated time passing. I didn't plan it ahead, but there was something about the trees as such a central marker of time because they're slow and fast. And I because of my particular state, I was feeling like, are these trees, ever going to grow? I actually considered putting a video camera on, because you don't see them grow, but in fact they do grow, and you're like, oh, it's been 2 years and they're this much bigger. So I think once I did the winter ones, then I went back and something else happened, because the summer ones had changed. So they had not only grown, but they had shifted the relationship to the land because they spread. And now that path, just so you know, is totally impassable.
Will you prune it?
It's just impossible. Like it's like a jungle. And because of not knowing ahead of time how, like, these are free trees that came from the government, and they were for shelter belts, I couldn't believe that you needed to have them 8 feet apart, so I didn't. I think 4 feet is good. And then, like everywhere we've lived, the first sets of trees we're still planting. The first sets are just like impassable. So that's sort of that other thing about time, and how you judge it, and what happens in spite of yourself. Yeah.
And Jay, you've also gone back to that place where you did this, where you did the red line, did you not?
Mm-hmm.
And it's still there, or barely?
Yeah, there's a halo still there. You kind of have to look for it a little bit, but it's there. I'm not sure how long it'll last for, but yeah, it lasted a little bit better on some plants than others. It's kind of an interesting thing how some plants maybe absorbed it or just washed off them or something. But yeah, this winter it might be the last winter of it. We'll see.
I think that's an interesting marker of time as well.
Yeah, I like how I thought it may just disappear. I'm really enjoying how it's hung around, especially because it wasn't supposed to. It's kind of I'm enjoying that quite a bit. I haven't got a letter yet, so maybe after this, I might get another one.
We also like that you don't know what the land is going to do, like how it reacts to that, and if it had rained more, it might be different. If it rained less,
Mm-hmm.
Like I guess I'm constantly going back to that thing about if you're trying to plan anything, the land has its own voice, and I feel that really strongly.
Yeah, I like how it's sort of it's like memory in some way.
Yeah.
And yeah, like my work is about memory in some ways. And so, yeah, it's interesting how it, like, some of it's fading and some of it isn't. And the other sort of this, like, and depending on the conditions that it is around it, that memory might fade a little bit faster or hold on in certain spots that are more protected. So I don't know, there's some really interesting metaphors happening there for it. I'm digging deeper into this work some more and gonna make some more things.
Well, the iron oxide didn't go away. It went under the soil, right? Like you couldn't lift it up. So the soil is processing it in its own way, which I just really like. That it's taken it on. It's out of your hands now. That it's its own voice.
Yeah, for sure. Thomas just asked me if I would talk a little bit about some of the things I might be working on upcoming. Maybe Linda, you could share on some of those things too. Yeah, I'm really interested in continuing with this soft and hard protest idea, of making things that make people think about where we're living and what the things that we're doing. So kind of drilling in those ideas. I read the news a lot. I stay up on current events, sometimes go watch court cases, things like that. Just, not like a hobby or anything, but like the crucial ones. Just to see what's on the go politically, not necessarily a politician, but really interested in these things that are shaping us and how much it affects our environment around us and trickles down. So, and continuing to work with materials like from here and just highlighting them in environments in different ways. I am working on gathering a bunch of soil samples from southern Saskatchewan right now, and I'm firing them in kilns and just seeing what they're doing. I'm in a real research phase, and then go kind of in building materials to go reinstall at some point with new work. How about you, Linda?
Well, so when the pandemic hit, I was working in another city, and I rushed back, came to the land, and stayed there for I'm still there because the pandemic is not over here in Saskatchewan. It's got worse and worse. So I just walked every day, and so I think maybe it's just a little more in-depth relationships to the land and the issue of sound, because I was, especially in the winter, the sound of coyotes slides across the land, across the ice. We had a lot of snow last winter, so we had months of that. Something about the sound moving. And I realized I was, every time I went out, I saw something different. It was like a gift. Might be, a porcupine sitting in the tree. And I realized that I wanted to express gratitude. So I've talked to 4 musicians, and they're each going to come and sing in gratitude to the land. So, and then the question was, there should be an audience. And I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know.
If it's for the land, I don't think, well, sorry, I offered an opinion when it wasn't asked for.
Well, it is. It's an interesting, and my gut feeling initially was to have nobody there. And then I thought, well, it's, I have this relationship to it. And each of the people have one woman came and sang for 6 hours in the hole. And so she's coming back. And other people that have different relationships, either this land or other land. Like one is an indigenous expert on the grasses and the healing properties of everything there. And so each of these people have this history, and maybe that's it, that it'll just be, there was this issue of, can you get a grant to do something that there's no audience for? And I guess, because I did the piece with the whole, I never figured out how to do any documentation of it, because it really felt like it was the time there that was the art, if you call it that, was the important part of it. It was that relationship and that time just sitting in the sand. Mm-hmm. So I'm still working through some of those issues with the same land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The next program of Spain is going to be about air. And so what you were talking about sound, that's one component of air, but also the sky, the air we breathe, gravity, how that plays into things. And it's really ephemeral. It's but yet it's connecting everything. It's part of everyone's piece already, and the way things are interacting. So I'm really looking forward to presenting that next. Yeah, I've been also just done a project where the intent was not to be focused on the wind, but the wind did play a very active part, and not acknowledging it was doing the wind an injustice. So I let it be, and I think that was one of the most nicest part of the performance that I did at that time.
Yeah, I've been interested in the things that you can't quite see, or that you hear, or you just hear a bit of. And I actually have trail cameras everywhere, and they often capture. Well, first of all, they capture weather, like in a way, because it's heat and motion, and so you get these things where there's like, what is this? But
is it wind blowing or leaves blowing that is captured?
Triggers it. Sometimes it lands. So sometimes you'll just see a tail, like a smear of an animal. So it's the elusive quality that this land has, and even when I'm out there, like the deer will sort of hide behind a tree, but you hear this rustling, and even though they don't realize how big they are, so they sort of peek out. And there's that thing about that, like what's invisible and what's barely visible, like all those layers that I've just been working with, or I'm thinking about.
I think that was a thing I saw in a lot of them, in a lot of the videos, like Alana Bartel's. There was a lot of that about the visible and the invisible. There'd be these emerging components, and then these receding components, and then just these amazing video, stills. Like, yeah, they were just, so amazing, and yeah, that I see something there of a connection.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from being in spaces that you can't quite grasp. I'll just add the something about care. In terms of Yves Tanguy, the care of the stones, like I found this so moving that it was, and the relationship between the people and the stones.
The way the three of them were interacting with two stones, and holding back or holding it for a moment longer than maybe proper, or just that very delicate balance between those six hands was such a beautiful play, and the focus of that one performer with all the stones on her arm. Oh,
yeah. Well, and also I kept thinking, like, in some ways, there's this intuitive spirit of the stones, and especially like the idea of this gravel pit, which is is extrusion. It's like in many ways a violation of the land.
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't know what she says about it, but it felt like this healing of this space that had been so damaged.
Interesting.
And I don't know if that's how she sees it. So people have other views.
The whole series of performances were about grieving and recovering, or how it takes time and work to recover over grieving, and so working with friends. And it was also at a time when the Black Lives Movement was coming on, and that whole commercial exploitation of the land was very much part of that piece.
Okay, that makes sense, because in some ways it was like a devastated landscape.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was, you know, there was such respect and care in how they moved through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And grief is invisible.
Yeah.
So it's like that. That sense that's just present.
Or if there's any more questions, please let us know. Okay.
Hello, Jay. Would you say you are also a ceramicist? Will this performative land-based intervention shift the way you approach ceramics-based work? I think that my ceramics-based work was starting to shift me towards this. Honestly, it was about 10 years ago or something. I was grieving a piece of land, and I went and I couldn't really go there anymore. So, and I'm a ceramicist, working clay. For those of you who don't know, firing clay and minerals. And so I went and made an offering to the land, left something behind, and I took a bag full of dirt, knowing I probably wasn't going to be able to go back there. And it was like settler family land. You know, it's a complicated history, but it's, you know, it is what it is. And so I took that dirt, I made some things with it, some objects. I gave one to my brother, one for myself, and then it kind of felt like it did something for us. It was like some weird magic, some ritual magic of healing for us both, just to have these things that were from there. And so I started realizing that there were some connections there. And then people also sometimes ask me to like cremate them into glaze, as like urns and things like that. I get weird requests all the time. So I think about like death sometimes, and I think about like materials all the time. And so it's sort of like these, like transmuting these materials that are either human or mineral or plant into another state, into an object. And so playing around with that idea, and then I just started taking the ideas back into the land, where it's like, well, I can use these ceramic materials because of my knowledge about them and influence the land in different ways. Know how to use them, and know how they might respond just intuitively because of my studio practice. So I could see them constantly going back and forth. If you come visit me in my studio, you can see my wall of jars of my collection of materials that I gather.
So our dog was cremated. The beloved dog in the picture. Maybe you could do something with Coke. I shouldn't have added that detail, but anyway.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a thing. You know, it's really interesting. I think, you know, materials can carry a lot of memory to them. We all know that, and especially when we start attaching our own personal ideas to those materials, like just pick up a rock and all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's important.
Or a piece of wood.
Yeah, so I really like triggering those ideas. Yeah, Thomas is back.
Hi, Thomas.
I never left. I was always here. I hope you can hear me now too.
Yes.
No, I just wanted to thank you all for such a great discussion, and I think there will be still opportunities if there are comments in the comment section that we can pass on. But I really appreciated you talking about the other works that were also in the screening. So just wanted to let everyone know about some of the other artists that are featured in that Johannes curated. So featuring Alana Bartal, S.P.A.N.E, Yves Laculak, and also, I think that's it. Yeah. So those are the other artists there. So you can see that on the Vukavu page and also in the theater tonight. Just if there's any last questions or comments from the group here.
Alana Bartal also has a show in Regina. So if you're watching this in Regina, please take a look at her show.
She's giving away seed packages. It said only take one, but I was the only one there, so
You're gonna give them out to people, I'm sure.
they're really lovely. They're from the Grassy Mountain.
Ah,
Yeah.
As
And that
always,
exhibition is at the Sherwood Village Library in the north of Regina. So yeah, I do encourage you to check that out as well. Thank you for that pitch there, Johannes. Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks, Joanna, for the comments. And yeah, I look forward to the future iterations. So watch the space. The next 2 iterations will happen within the year. So November and for air and fire ending on the equinox. So stay posted. Thanks very much, everyone. Take care.
Okay.
bye.